These 6 artists are wildly popular today, but when they were just starting out, many of them couldn't land a record deal or were straight up dropped by their record labels. For whatever reason it was, record labels didn't believe in these artists, but they would eventually regret that.
I was crazy enough to believe what the I was saying was gonna happen. And that's why I was persistent enough and consistent enough to exist now.
50 Cent is often regarded as one of the greatest rappers of all time with one of the craziest come-up stories. But things didn't start out so simple. After being blacklisted from the industry, dropped by his own label, and having his debut album shelved. He was raised in Queens, New York and got into the street life at a young age, following the passing of his mom. By the age of 12, he started selling drugs at school, and by 19, he was super deep into the street life. After getting arrested a couple of times, he was sentenced to 3 to 9 years in prison, but instead he served 6 months at a boot camp. Following this, he wanted to turn his life around. He started rapping and eventually found his break when a friend introduced him to Jam Master Jay from Run DMC. 50 said in an interview with Billboard, "A friend of mine was having a conversation with Jam Master Jay, and I was able to kind of work my way into that conversation. He said he wanted to develop a new artist, and I told him, I rap, you know, and from there he gave me a shot to do it. But Jay, he helped me develop my whole song structure because I didn't know how to count bars or anything." Jay saw potential in 50 and took him under his wing, teaching him the basics of songwriting and production. However, despite recording a ton of songs, most major labels weren't biting, until he signed with Columbia Records. Although that signing was very short-lived. Things were looking up for 50. He had just signed to a major label, was seeing success from his song How to Rob, and even got to tour with Nas. However, he had released a song called Ghetto in which he detailed stories of gangs and street life in Queens, and that song was super controversial. It's even rumored that this song is what led to what happened on May 24th, 2000. On that fateful summer day, 50 was attacked by a gunman outside his grandmother's home after getting into a friend's car. A car pulled up and the shooter shot him 9 times. He was quickly rushed to the hospital and spent 13 days recovering there. While he was in the hospital, after signing a publishing deal with Columbia, he was dropped by the label and blacklisted from the music industry. Many people believe that this was because of his song Ghetto Quran, despite 50 saying in an interview, "Everything that's in Ghetto Quran is in Cop Shot, a book in the library. Everything in that song was in the newspapers at the time that it went on." However, even investigators believe that this song is what got 50 shot. Regardless, 50 was now recovering from a shooting, dropped from his label, and blacklisted from the music industry. His album that he was working on with Columbia Records was unable to be released since they own the rights to it, and they must not have wanted anything to do with 50 because of the potential violence following him getting shot.
I'm in the hospital 13 days. After that, I called back to Columbia. I'm like, yo, what's up? I'm ready. And they don't have no answers for me. That's worse than getting shot.
Despite Columbia not believing in him or wanting anything to do with him, 50 believed in himself. He went back into the underground, releasing mixtapes like Guess Who's Back, which caught the attention of Eminem and Dr. Dre, which led to them signing him. He then released his debut album Get Rich or Die Tryin', which as we all know was a huge success, selling over 870,000 copies in its first week and leading to hit songs like Into Club and 21 Questions. And of course, we cannot forget the absolute classic Many Men, which spawned from the whole shooting incident. The story of 50 Cent's come up is truly inspirational.
I feel like everything that anybody ever said in life will be a disadvantage to me, I'm gonna make it my advantage.
Kanye West is many people's favorite artist of all time, but record labels were unable to recognize his generational talent when he first came onto the scene. When Kanye came into the music industry in the 90s, he was mostly producing tracks for artists in the Chicago area. His reach expanded as he began working with a management production company called Hip Hop since 1978. But in 2000, despite being successful as a producer, working in-house at Rockefeller Records, no one was giving Kanye the chance to demonstrate his skill as a rapper. Time magazine said, "The first time Kanye West asked the folks at Rockefeller Records to let him rap, there was an uncomfortable silence." As a producer, West had churned out hits for Rockefeller's intimidating trio of stars, Jay-Z, Cameron, and Beanie Siegel, and earned praise for his great ear and tireless ethic. But in 2002, the idea that someone like West could be a successful rapper was faintly absurd. And Rockefeller wasn't the only label passing up on Kanye as a rapper. Despite his hits as a producer, labels big and small would not sign him. Part of the reason was because he wasn't your average rapper at the time. Kanye said, "It was a strike against me that I didn't wear baggy baggy jeans and jerseys and that I never hustled, never sold drugs. He even said that he would leave meetings all the time crying. Kanye's style, influenced by his middle-class background, didn't fit the street rapper aesthetic that was prevalent at the time. Labels straight up did not know how to market him. But Damon Dash, the head of Rockefeller at the time, decided to sign him. However, it was a bit of a backhanded compliment, as they mostly wanted to prevent Kanye from leaving to produce for other record labels, so it wasn't really because they believed in his ability as a rapper.
I feel like everything that anybody ever said in life would be a disadvantage to me, I'm gonna make it my advantage. Says you can't rap because you a producer? Okay. Oh, I ain't hear that beat. Oh yeah, I know, I produced it. I just rapped on it before you got a chance to hear it, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm gonna use everything that everybody says that I can't do, and I'm gonna flip it to the positive. Like, I look at everything as a glass half full and half empty.
He continued working at Rockefeller as a producer until he was in a brutal car accident that shattered his jaw and changed his career forever. Kanye said, "The accident gave me the opportunity to do what I really wanted to do. I was a music producer, and everyone was telling me that I had no business becoming a rapper. But during that recovery period, I just spent all of my time honing my craft and making the college dropout." He famously recorded the song Through the Wire 2 weeks after his incident with his jaw still wired shut. Just 2 years later, he released the album The College Dropout, and the rest was history. He talked about his struggles of labels rejecting him on the song Last Call, in which he famously said, "Everybody out there, listen here. I played them Jesus Walks and they didn't sign me." A lot of lines on the song detailed his experiences with labels before dropping his album, with lines like, "Last year shopping my demo, I was trying to shine, every told me that I couldn't rhyme. Ain't nobody expect Kanye to end up on top. They expected that College Dropout to drop then flop. And it's funny how wasn't nobody interested till the night I almost killed myself in a Lexus." Despite no one believing in Kanye, The College Dropout was a major hit with huge songs like All Falls Down, Jesus Walks, Through the Wire, and more. Of course, lately Kanye has been in a ton of controversy and actually lost his deals with Def Jam Recordings and Sony Music Publishing, so you can't help but wonder if he'll prove the big labels wrong again.
It was taking a step back. I got dropped from Motown Records. You lose leverage, you lose people believing in you because they, well, why didn't it work?
Bruno Mars is one of the best-selling artists of all time, but in the beginning of his career, he was struggling to find his footing, and was even dropped by Motown Records. Bruno Mars was born into a musical family in Honolulu, Hawaii, and began performing from a very young age, with some locals even calling him Little Elvis, because he actually did Elvis impersonations when he was 4 years old. His parents were both artists who performed covers under the name The Love Notes. His dad taught him to play the guitar, and he was a young prodigy. After he graduated high school, he moved out to LA to chase his dreams of becoming a famous musician. He didn't just move out on a whim though, because his sister who lived in LA had played one of his demos for a guy named Mike Lynn, who was the head A&R at Dr. Dre's record label. However, he didn't end up signing with Aftermath Records, but he did eventually get into contact with Motown. Bruno Mars eventually signed to Motown Records in 2004, but he was dropped less than a year later.
It was taking a step back. I used to be able to walk into a room and say, "Hey, I'm Bruno Mars, I'm signed with Motown Records." And then now I have to say I got dropped from Motown Records. You lose leverage.
He explained in an interview in 2012 that he was dropped because he didn't come from a recording background. He said, "I knew I could sing, but there's so much more I had to learn. I didn't come from the recording background. I came from doing live shows and performing with bands, and that was my craft. I didn't know what it took to become, to record, and be a recording artist." Being dropped as a young and aspiring artist was a huge setback for him. But rather than giving up, he said, "My goal was, I'm not going back to Hawaii and facing my friends and my family saying it didn't pan out. I've got to do something." So Bruno Mars got back to work and began honing his skills. In 2005, he signed a publishing deal with Westside Independent and began to work with the record producers Steve Lindsay and Cameron Strang. They mentored Bruno, teaching him how to write pop songs. He spent a lot of time in the industry, learning the ins and outs of pop music while also playing in a band called the Sex Panthers. He learned that it wasn't just being a talented singer, performer, and overall artist, but he also had to know how to write a hit song. He began writing songs for other artists and saw some success as a producer. After developing himself for 4 years, by 2009 he was finally able to secure a deal with Atlantic Records. After signing, he released his debut album Doo-Wops and Hooligans, which was a huge success, with hit songs like Just the Way You Are and Grenade. He went on to release songs like That's What I Like, Uptown Funk, 24K Magic, and many more. more hits. It's obvious that his hiatus, where he learned his way around the industry and learned how to write hit songs, was extremely important to his success, helping him become the superstar that he is today.
Holy shit. In my mind, I'm like, oh boy, like this is the beginning of the end.
Linkin Park is one of the most commercially successful rock bands of the 21st century, thanks to their unique style. But record labels didn't believe that that style would work out for them. First starting out as Zero, then Hybrid Theory, then eventually landing on Linkin Park, the group eventually found their groove in the late 90s. However, they were struggling to find a record deal. They had connections to a guy named Jeff Blue, who was the vice president of A&R for Zamba Music. He was helping them try to get the attention of record labels, but continuously failed. They were rejected multiple times by multiple record labels. Eventually though, their boy Jeff got a job as vice president of Warner Bros. Records and helped Linkin Park get signed. Things were looking up as they finally got signed to a major label, but then the band encountered another problem. Linkin Park was working on the album Hybrid Theory and wanted to release it as their debut album. However, the label wasn't a fan of the experimental sound. Lead singer Chester Bennington said, "We believed in what we were doing so much and we were like, why can't anybody else see this?" The label also loved Chester's singing, but they weren't so big on fellow member Mike Shinoda's rapping.
Was that during Hybrid Theory, there was a question from the label, like, well, the singer's so good. Like, they even went to, at a certain point, they kept trying to meddle in our creative process and change the DNA. The pitch was, we're gonna build a new thing all around you. You are the star. You already are the star. Like, it should be all about you.
Yeah, let's just speak to the id
so
and
just
figure
like,
it out.
Whatever about these other guys. We don't need.
Mike went on to say that the label wanted to get rid of his rapping entirely, and that they thought in general the rest of the band was expendable, other than Chester. He continued on saying that Chester pulled his bandmates aside one night and told them what the label was trying to suggest.
Holy shit. In my mind, I'm like, oh boy, like this is the beginning of the end, right? Because they're right, like he's incredible and we need him.
Yep.
Like, I don't know if he needs us. So they went to him and they said these things. We were like, well, what did you say? And he goes, I told him to go f himself.
Despite the label trying to change the DNA of the band, the boys stood firm with their vision, and it worked out. They released their debut album Hybrid Theory, which launched them into mainstream success. It peaked at number 2 on the Billboard 200, it's certified 12 times platinum, and it sold over 32 million copies. They garnered a huge fan base, tons of critical acclaim, and have sold over 70 million albums. After Chester Bennington tragically passed away in 2017, Linkin Park disbanded, but they did perform in the months following with some tribute concerts and benefit shows, and they had various artists filling in for Chester, which really goes to show how important their friendship was to their success.
All we wanted was a record deal, but it was hard.
Destiny's Child has sold over 60 million records worldwide, but when they started out, they were actually dropped by their first record label. Destiny's Child was a group that when first signed was comprised of Beyonce, LaToya Luckett, Latavia Robertson, and Kelly Rowland. Early on, they went by the name Girls Time, and were going to multiple auditions trying to get a record deal. They performed locally, entered a competition named Star Search, which they lost, and trained rigorously with Beyonce's father, who helped them hone their singing and dancing skills. There were some lineup changes that were made, and they began auditioning for record labels. After going through a few name changes and eventually landing on Destiny, they auditioned and eventually signed with Elektra Records. However, shortly after signing and without even releasing any music under the label, they were dropped.
All we wanted was a record deal. We heard, at that time, that was the ultimate thing in our lives. That was our goal. So to finally get it, and then after all that hard work to lose it, especially the young girls who don't really understand, they just want to...
How old were you at the time?
Oh my God, we were 13, 14 years old.
Oh, wow, okay.
15 at the oldest. But it was hard. We didn't really understand why. We didn't understand the politics and none of that.
Beyonce's dad, Matthew Knowles, who was managing the girls, was under a lot of pressure following this. He even left his job and briefly separated from his wife because of all the stress they were both under. But him and the girls kept working and eventually landed a record deal with Columbia Records. After they got signed, they changed their name to Destiny's Child and released their first single from their debut album, No No No, which charted and helped them get a lot of attention. Their self-titled debut album peaked at 67 on the Billboard 200 and eventually went platinum. Then they followed up with the album The Writing's on the Wall, which became their breakthrough album. It peaked at 5 on the Billboard 200, has sold over 13 million copies and launched them into fame. It had hit songs like Bills, Bills, Bills and Say My Name, and then the rest was history. They released some more albums like Survivor, 8 Days of Christmas, and Destiny Fulfilled, seeing a ton of success over the years. Following that, the group split up and decided to pursue solo careers. They didn't entirely separate though, performing together on occasion, releasing compilation projects, and they even joined Beyonce for her Super Bowl performance in 2012.
I knew it was time for him to grow, and the only way he could grow was if he was going to have the same kind of corporate conversations that I was subjected to.
In 2022, Diddy's net worth was estimated to be at $1 billion. But when he first started out, things were pretty rocky. Diddy started his career in 1990 working at Uptown Records as an intern. He then got promoted to talent director, working closely with the founder of the label, Andre Harrell. He was clearly talented and had a lot of passion. Diddy said, "I was like a wonder kid at Uptown. The first record I produced sold 2 million copies, and I'd only produced it because the producer didn't show up." He was working his way up at Uptown Records, but eventually began to butt heads with the founder, Andre, which resulted in him getting fired in July of 1993. He said, "I was very passionate and I didn't understand protocol or workplace politics. So I got fired because there can't be two kings in one castle. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful to Andre, but I was fighting so hard." Andre preferred a smoother, more diplomatic vibe, which didn't really match up with Diddy, but firing Diddy would become what he claims to be one of the best things that happened to him.
So I started to branch out in the movies and the television. So then Puff wouldn't really listen to anybody but me. So my full-time job became managing Puff, and I was doing other things. So even when I let Puff go, for the whole time he was let go, he was always on payroll. I never stopped paying him until he found his next spot. His artists were always still getting per diem, because I didn't do it to hurt him, but I knew it was time for him to grow, and the only way he could grow was if he was going to have the same kind of corporate conversations that I was subjected to.
So after he left Uptown, he didn't let him being fired hold him back. By the end of the same year, he had created his own record label, Bad Boy Records. He signed the notorious B.I.G., which, as I'm sure you can guess, was a great choice. He actually discovered Biggie while he was working at Uptown. He helped Biggie release his debut album, Ready to Die, in 1994, which became a huge success. Creating his own label was a game changer for Diddy. Bad Boy Records became a powerhouse in the music industry, with tons of successful artists like Craig Mack, Faith Evans, 112, Total, Mace, Shine, Carl Thomas, and more. He also had an in-house production team called The Hitmen, who worked with tons of successful artists. His entrepreneurial spirit and ability to recognize talent led him to further success in the music industry. Not only that, but he began to release his own music, with his debut single Can't Nobody Hold Me Down peaking at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and staying on the charts for 28 weeks. Over the years, Diddy became one of the most successful artists / producers / label executives in the music industry. He's won 3 Grammys, started multiple other successful business ventures, and is one of the richest people to emerge from the hip-hop scene. So if you're watching this and you've just been fired, or someone didn't believe in you, or things aren't going your way, maybe you could learn a thing or two from the people here on this list.